Honestly, everything in this story seemed relatively normal until we get to Bertrand Franks, and then things take a turn. Hello, and happy Halloween. It's been a while since I did a video about short stories, and I couldn't help but notice that there is quite an abundance of Halloween-themed anthologies. I thought to wrap up the month of October that it would be fun to show a little love to some of the spooky Halloween anthologies that are out there. I settled in on 3 different anthology books, and from each book I pulled 3 different stories by different authors. First up, we have October Screams, a Halloween anthology. From this first book, there are a couple of familiar names. The first story that I read was called Tate by Ronald Malfi, who I read for the first time in January of this year. I read his book Senseless, and I really thoroughly enjoyed it. So, of course, if I saw his name, I was, you know, at the beginning of this short story, we have established that it is Halloween, that we have a couple, Nick and Alice. This is a bit of a somber occasion because it turns out that their son Tate actually died on the previous Halloween. And so, of course, Halloween would probably be a rough day for anybody. You would be inclined to think of your young child regardless, but for that to be the anniversary of his death, it is hitting Nick particularly hard. Alice, who I don't want to say she seems cold to Nick, it just sort of seems like she is perhaps overcompensating at first. At first, it seems like perhaps she's just overcompensating for how bad Nick is handling things, and she's trying so hard to be the strong one that perhaps she's coming across as a little bit, not indifferent, but just a little bit unsympathetic, as you would think, because despite the fact that it's indicated pretty early that she was Tate's stepmother, they still lost a child. Because this is the frame of reference that we have, that they are both mourning, but that Nick is more in a state of despair, when there are trick-or-treaters coming to the house, and suddenly one of the children is alone, and Nick is swearing up and down that it is Tate, to the point that he takes the kid, drags him inside, and says, "Oh my gosh, it's been so long. It's been a year since he died. It's been so long. You must be hungry." And he's pulling this kid into the house, and the kid's going with him. And Alice is like, what is happening? What are you doing? Like, that's not Tate." And he's like, "Of course it's Tate. Look at him." And she's like, "It's just a costume. That's not Tate." The rest of this short story is trying to figure out if there is a supernatural element and this actually is Tate and she's just in denial, or if Nick is just so consumed in grief that he is deluding himself into thinking that this child is his late son. Whether he's just kidnapped the child or their child came back from the dead, it's a scary premise. Ronald Malfi was really able to give you enough information. You do get these emotional kind of tugs because of not just the grief, but the accusations of, well, he wasn't actually your flesh and blood, and you never wanted to be a mother. And so, again, it almost doesn't even matter if it's true or not, because either way, it's horrifying. It's horrifying if it's untrue and her spouse is saying this to her, how hurtful and painful that would be. But also it's horrifying to think that, yeah, she didn't want to be a mom, and that if he was right and she really didn't care or something, that would also be scary. There's no good happy ending. You just know that it's just gonna be dark or depressing in a different way depending on how it goes. I thought this book started off very strong with the first story I selected. Next up is another familiar name. I read 11-1 by Philip Fracassi, who, I believe, I will correct myself if I'm wrong, I read his book Saculina. Another story that I enjoyed. I saw the name, of course. I'm going to want to check it out again. So this one is a little bit different. Unlike the previous story, this one takes place the day after Halloween. Our main character, when she wakes up, still in her witch costume, and she is incredibly hungover from the previous day. And it's to the point that she apparently drinks so much that she doesn't even have a clear-cut memory of everything that happened on Halloween. As she's kind of trying to get ready for the day, the memory of everything that happened the day before is kind of slowly coming back to her. So we come to find out that she was not hungover from partying. She was hungover because she was incredibly depressed, because for whatever reason, her fiance Robert decided that that was the time to break off their engagement. This might seem like a small detail to some people, but honestly to me, this is so interesting. He liked her enough to propose. She liked him enough to accept. Now, Robert, for his reasons, has changed his mind. But for him to choose a day like Halloween, to wait until she is dressed up like a witch, and then to go to her apartment in his regular clothes and break off their engagement, there is such a lack of dignity in that, in forcing her to sit there in her witch costume and have to take in this news while he's just dressed normal. Like, that's so, there's something kind of ugly about that. Like, how is he supposed to take her seriously as she's responding to this? And of course she's gonna feel ridiculous. And I'm like, dude, Robert's kind of an asshole. Regardless, she remembers him asking for his ring back without getting into too much detail. Shit starts to get real weird. Kids start coming to her door and she's like, I know it's not Halloween. I just had a really rough Halloween, and it was definitely Halloween then, as I was dressed up for Halloween. So why are all of these children coming to my door trick-or-treating, acting like it's still Halloween? This is a story that is a little bit more open-ended. There are reasons for what's happening. You don't necessarily understand what those reasons are, but you understand that there are reasons that exist. It's what you initially believe is just due to the fact that she's hungover, having this kind of slight sense of distorted reality a little bit. You come to realize is actually goes beyond that, and that there actually is a little bit more of a greater sense of distorted reality. I know that this probably seems really vague, but I'm just going to leave it there. That everything that happened with her on Halloween, this weird Halloween 2.0 that seems to be happening, everything kind of becomes related, but I will say that the story ends in a bit of an open-ended way, which I don't mind. I'm not upset about it. I don't mind, and I'm not upset about it. And the last story that I read from this first book is called Any Other Wednesday in a Bar by Kat Voleur. This is from the perspective of somebody sitting in a bar witnessing an interaction between two other people. The woman is this super sexy kind of vampy type lady. You're given the impression that she's dressed as a vampire for Halloween. She's not just dressing the part, she's really leaning in to the kind of seductive, you know, like the kind of like sexy lady vibe that like the vampiress is gonna have. And the dude is a horny dude who clearly likes this sexy lady, and he's trying to, you know, do the dang thing. The person witnessing this interaction is kind of like, oh, he said the wrong thing, I wonder if he can save it. And oh, she seems to be more interested in him than I think she should be based off of that bad one-liner he gave. Judging this interaction clearly in her favor. He clearly has the goal of trying to score with this woman. The person's kind of trying to judge whether or not he's gonna succeed. It is kind of amusing. She can just sort of say these kind of weird off things and he won't disagree, or he'll just kind of go along with a lot of it. It's kind of interesting to see how much she can get away with without him wanting to like push back at all, because he doesn't want to ruin his chances, you know? This felt like it had a little bit more social commentary on like that kind of hookup culture type stuff. But the observations of this person, you kind of get the sense that this isn't the first time that they've seen this woman. Where things end up in this story was unexpected, so I did really appreciate that, and I liked the ending. Okay, our next anthology book is called Dark Hallows: 10 Halloween Haunts. These are all new authors that I was not familiar with. First up, we have Starting Early by Adam Cesare or Cesare. Cesar, surely, right? It's not spelled like Caesar salad, but it's spelled in a way that I would assume it's Caesar. It doesn't have like the little accent. So Caesar. Maggie lives in an apartment building and she has a young neighbor named Cecily who's 10 years old. They've established a little bit of a friendship relationship, and Cecily will go over by Maggie and hang out while her mom's at work or whatever. Now, Maggie is pretty into Halloween. You know how for Christmas they sell those little miniatures scenes that you can, put up around your house? She's into that, but for Halloween. I don't know, are they just called miniatures? You know what I mean, like the little towns, and it's like, oh, you can buy the different pieces to make a little town or whatever, you know what I mean. Cecily, being a 10-year-old wanting to be included, is like, hey, I would love to help you unpack your little town and help you set it up. Maggie's on board with Cecily helping her to do this. Here is where things get a little bit weird. Maggie tells her, hey, everything that we need for this is in these containers here. And Cecily is like, hey, what about those containers? And Maggie's like, don't worry about it. Cecily waits for Maggie to have to go to work the next day. And while she's gone, she takes the key that Maggie gave her for emergencies and she lets herself into Maggie's apartment and she investigates the other containers. It's very misleading in terms of the way that the characters are set up versus where we end up. It's one of those endings again where it really could go a lot of different directions. Sometimes a short story feeling more open-ended can feel like the result of the author just kind of running out of time, sort of. But that's not how this feels. This feels very intentionally open-ended. It feels like it's meant to let you kind of fill in the gaps as to what's going to happen next. So this is another one. I don't think there was any stories in here that I didn't like, but it's another very solid story. The next one is called The Darkest Night of the Year, and this is by Mark Parker. This one is a little bit different, where it comes across as being more based in reality without any sort of supernatural influences in it. This is about a woman named Rosalind who, as a child, her stepfather thought it would be funny to play a prank on her for Halloween. The prank would be scary to experience as an adult, but as a child, I don't remember if it said how old she was, but she was a kid. And this experience, this prank, not just ruined Halloween for her since then, but quite literally traumatized her to the point that she has nightmares about it. So at this point, she is an adult living on her own with the exception of her kitty poos. She has a Maine Coon cat, one of those big cats that look like Ron Perlman. She has one of those, but does it have a name? Roscoe. It's just her and Roscoe. She's all alone in a new neighborhood and it's Halloween, and so her trauma and her anxiety surrounding this holiday is getting to her a bit. And you're not really sure if what she is experiencing is hallucinations and delusions triggered by her trauma and by this holiday coming around again, or if she really has fallen victim to either some sort of supernatural force or potentially dangerous human beings who are taking certain liberties that perhaps they should not be taking. She's trying to find excuses for the weird things happening on this Halloween night to not be real. If you're just mentally ill, then there is hope that things could get better. But if all of this stuff happening is real, then I fear there is not hope. So just being mentally unwell would be the preferable situation here. Again, it's somewhat open-ended. It's not a clear-cut answer, but I appreciated that it was plausibly more about psychological horror than just the, like the monster in the shadows. And the last story that I read from this book is called There Are Corners of the World Where Lost Things Gather by Robert Morrish. This was my favorite story out of all the stories that I read. If your short story is 40 pages, you have more time to world build than if it's 15 pages, right? So you have to kind of align your expectations accordingly. I don't remember exactly how many pages this was. It was closer to 40. Whatever. I don't care, man. It was really good, and it was very effective world building for a short story. We have a 12-year-old boy, and this is about largely the relationship between him and his older brother, Trevor. Trevor is 15. Their family dynamic is just like a little bit weird. He's very close with his brother. It adds a lot of turmoil and stress to him when his brother gets a girlfriend, Jenny. That's hard for him. He is now not the center of attention for his brother. He likes Jenny just fine. He's just struggling. But his brother does try to include him in a lot of the activities that they do together, including doing drugs. They are regularly smoking stuff. Sometimes there are mushrooms involved. And then it gets even crazier for Halloween. And so it's one of those things where they will take something, do some sort of adrenaline rush activity, which is made even more fun due to their state of intoxication. Then it's like they're just waiting for the next opportunity to get to do it again, but up the ante this time. When it comes to Halloween, it's all three of them, and they take some stuff, and then they go and do some stuff that you would hope they would not do if they were not under the influence. But it's not just a innocent adrenaline rush. It's dangerous, and there are repercussions for their actions. That is the basic plot. Now, why was this so good? The world building that the author creates. You really visualize these outings that these kids, I mean the 15, they're still kids, that these kids are going out and doing together under the fall of night. I'll admit, I'm pretty tame. I don't smoke, I don't drink, I don't do any of that stuff, so I can't really relate to that aspect of it. But I can imagine that feeling of being a 12-year-old who, you know, your older siblings letting you hang out with them and you're going on this adventure together and it feeling very exciting. That inner turmoil, having to be on your own a little bit more, the feelings that the 12-year-old is struggling with, I think are very relatable and very understandable. You get a sense that this is just a genuinely hard time for the 12-year-old who is still being perfectly reasonable. They're happy for their brother. They want their brother to be happy. They like Jenny just fine. There's nothing unreasonable about the feelings involved here, but that doesn't mean that it's not challenging. So I just really felt like the author, Robert Morrish, he really just made you sympathize with our main character, and it really felt believable and vulnerable. And the way that the story works out, the ending is very effective for what he was going for. And I thought that this story was so well executed, well paced, and it's very hard to do that with short stories. This is the author that stuck out to me. Oh, and just another little thing he did, that there is a point in the story where he addresses us, the reader, and I do love it. when authors talk to me in the book. I do like that a lot. So that was just sort of the cherry on top. Our last book is called Twisted Tales of Halloween Horror. This is interesting because it's called the Sisterhood of the Black Pen. I'll put some information up on the screen here. It's apparently this organization that tries to help women or non-binary authors who are not familiar with the publishing industry get published for the first time. They do have more experienced authors that are within the sisterhood. This anthology kind of stressed itself as being either very smutty or very gory. So I was like, you know what? Neither of these first two were smutty and not that gory. So you know what? Let's fucking go. First up, we have a story called Ouija Board by Kari Robbins. This is about a group of college-aged women who, it's Halloween, they're going to use the Ouija board. It's something that seems a little bit old. Yeah, I think a lot of, I don't know about boys, but I think a lot of girls go through that phase when they're maybe preteen, early teens, with being interested in witchcraft and kind of playing around with tarot cards or Ouija boards. I'm not talking about people who are of the Wiccan religion. I'm talking about kids who are watching The Craft and wanting to play with a Ouija board. You know, like that don't take it as a serious experience. They're just kind of playing around, you know? So for these kids to now grow up and be college aged and still wanting to pull out their Ouija board on Halloween was like, oh, it seems a little bit unusual that if you're just sort of playing around, that you would be playing around at that age. One of these women had been dating a boy when they were in high school, and on prom night, he disappeared. And he's never been found. And they haven't really used the Ouija board since then. It's been weird. It's been a weird time, and people kind of maybe not in the mood to play around with that. So we're looking at all of this through the perspective of Katie, but there's a group of women. Sara is the one who, her boyfriend Dylan disappeared on prom night. But Katie's the one who's like, I don't really want to do this Ouija board. And I don't blame her, because the Ouija board calls her ass out. The Ouija board is not a girl's girl. It's like, hey, Katie has a fucking secret. Guys, Katie has a fucking secret. So it's like, oh, what's your secret, Katie? Like, do you know something about Dylan? Like, they automatically jump to it being Dylan related, which is valid because it is. And so Katie gets outed by this Ouija board that she knows something, and she's not admitting or divulging anything at this point. But the rest of the girls are sus because of what the Ouija board said. Just to say that we do discover what Katie's secret is specifically. The thing I thought was really interesting about this story is they said in this anthology it's gory and or smutty. This one has got some smut in it. But at first, I was like, okay, whatever. Like, it's just sort of in here. But I was wrong. It works so well. It works so well because even though at first you're like, okay, whatever, unless you're super into that, you do you. Getting you into that frame of mind, and then for the tides to turn so quickly, it feels like such emotional whiplash to go from this fairly intense smut, and the tone changes just at the drop of a hat, and you're like, holy shit, like it worked so well in the story actually as this tool to just really throw you for a loop, and you're just completely taken aback. And yeah, so secrets are revealed, and there's some smut. There is smut, but not, don't, you know, if you read this, just don't get too excited or worked up about that part. It's not gonna stay. It's okay. I warned you. Don't say I didn't. After each story, it gives you a little snippet about that author. So I thought that was really cool that I was able to see after reading this that this short story is actually our author, Kari Robin's first venture into horror. So I was like, oh my gosh, for that, having that context, it's even more impressive. Next up, we have a story called Don't Listen by Krystyna Lee. Now, apparently this is inspired by a real legend that spawned in St. Charles, Missouri. There's a poem, which I can put up on the screen, and I guess the poem is real. Now, in Krystyna's actual story, what she has played out is we have our main character, Anna. It's Halloween. She has not planned very well for how she's going to spend her Halloween. Her friend, who clearly has a crush on her, Ben's like, hey, we should go to this party. He clearly wants to go with her to this party. And it's not specifically acknowledged, but you can tell that she kind of feels bad that he's excited at the prospect of going, and she at first is kind of like not wanting to. She eventually sees how enthusiastic he is about wanting to go with her, and she agrees to meet him later that night so they can walk to this party together. As she is getting ready, trying to get ready for the party, she's listening to this podcast, which is a local podcast in St. Charles, Missouri, that is doing a live Halloween show. And they are talking about this legend, which apparently is like, hey, if you hear this poem and then you hear somebody calling your name, you best not look. Don't do it. Because, like, they're going to get you. It's like The Ring. If you watch the tape, you have 7 days. You know, this is like, if you listen to this poem, you have not long at all before this voice is going to start saying your name, and you have to, don't listen to it. Don't acknowledge it. Don't turn to look at them. Don't talk to them. Don't. This podcaster is broadcasting this poem live across the airwaves in the city that this legend supposedly takes place, right? And she's like, yeah, whatever, doesn't take it seriously, because of course she doesn't. She starts walking to go meet Ben. And what happens? You know what happens. She hears the voice calling her. What does she think? She thinks it's Ben playing a prank. What do you think? Do you think it's a prank? I'll leave it there. Now, I liked the premise of the story. I think it's always fun when you have that kind of inspiration, a legend or a myth or something, and you're kind of playing off of that to, make your version of events or whatever. The only thing that kind of threw me about this a little bit, at some point in time after this poem is read over the airwaves, somebody goes missing. It just seemed, it kind of took me out of it just slightly, because this is being broadcasted on the news that this person is missing. Okay, so you're telling me that somebody noticed that this person was gone. It was reported to the police and it made its way onto the news all within 20 minutes. The 20 minutes isn't exact, that's an estimation on my part, but it would be roughly 20 minutes with the time frame that we're given. That part threw me a little bit. That didn't seem very realistic. Putting that aside, the rest of the story, I liked the premise, and I thought it was fun when I saw at the end that this author, Krystyna Lee, she has her own podcast called Macabre Matters. So I was like, oh, okay, so it makes sense that she was kind of inspired by the idea of the live podcast broadcast. Okay, and our last and final story of the book and of all the stories that I read is called Never Run Out of Candy by Sara Clementina. So once again, this is inspired by a real thing called Samhain, which is a Celtic festival marking the beginning of winter. And there's some background lore that is given to us for context. So this is about a woman named Fiona. Her husband is getting ready to take their children out for Halloween to go trick-or-treating. Fiona is choosing to stay home in order to hand out the candy to the other kids, otherwise there's not going to be anybody home. And so her husband and her kids leave. She's like, hey, I have 3 bags of candy. If that's not enough and I start to run out, I'll call you. So answer your phone if I call you, please. And he's like, yeah, okay. And so she goes. Or she doesn't go, he goes. She stays. She's just chilling and vibing. She's like, I'm just going to have some wine. I'm going to hand out candy and I'm going to chill. There is kind of this slightly ominous vibe going on though, because outside of their house on the power line, there's just this murder of crows that won't shut the hell up. And they're just cawing and cawing. So kids are trick-or-treating, and then all of a sudden she has a trick-or-treater who is not an itty-bitty, but rather a very large, scary man. And so she just kind of gives him some candy, and then it's like, okay, and he leaves. But then there's more, and she keeps getting scary-looking men coming to her door, trick-or-treating, but the vibe, not just their appearance, like the vibe is off. And then other things start to get weird. And it gets a very kind of a surreal energy to it, where, we have this lore of the fact that these people, they live in LA at this point, but both her and her husband are of Irish descent. So you have this backstory of Samhain and everything all the lore that goes on with that about needing to have this candy or these goods to pacify these entities or whatever. And she is out of candy. She has these scary men continuing to come to her house who are now upset that she doesn't have candy for them. She has this chorus of crows cawing on her power line. It's also very, very hot because it's LA and she doesn't have their AC is broken. So there's all these different things coming together to make her feel very, very stressed. But it doesn't really reach that breaking point until she goes into her refrigerator and the food that's in the refrigerator is all rotting and moldy. And it wasn't just a little bit ago. So she starts to freak out. She's trying to call her husband. Her husband's not answering, but that's not super clear if something bad happened or if he's just not answering because he's busy trick-or-treating and he is really bad at answering his phone anyway. And it's another one of those stories where you're not really sure if everything that she's experiencing is a supernatural thing that she's actually experiencing, or if this lady is just confused about slightly odd events that are still based in reality. There is kind of a more reasonable explanation provided for some of the things. It's not wrapped up in like, oh, I guess it was nothing after all type thing. It doesn't feel like, oh, it was nothing after all. It feels like the story isn't actually over yet. That's kind of the sense you get at the end. This one I really, really liked. I love stories, even if it's temporary. I really enjoy stories that have that kind of surreal, otherworldly feel. And what starts off as more kind of ominous becomes very chaotic and stressful. You can imagine from her perspective. And again, I think it's very fun to take those sorts of origins of some sort of myth or festival or whatever, and to kind of play around with it. And the thing that I learned about this author is that she is currently writing an epic sci-fi romance, and she likes to birdwatch. If she likes to birdwatch, she might have some experience with a murder of crows that perhaps wouldn't shut up. So those were all of the stories that I read. I enjoyed all of these anthologies, even though I did only pick a few stories to kind of sample each of them. There are a lot of talented authors who are able to write amazing short stories. I've developed such a new appreciation for short stories since starting this channel. And like I said, I enjoyed all of these, but I am particularly excited to look into Robert Morrish because I thought that story in particular was very well done. Because I had just turned 12 that year. An awkward age, precariously balanced between a child's cloudless skies and the gathering storms of young adulthood. Like, I'm sorry, beautiful much? Like, that's beautiful. That is beautiful writing. That is what the fuck? Mr. Morrish? So this October was definitely a better spooky season for me than last year was. So I am grateful for that, and I'm grateful for you guys to come and hang out with me as I'm reading, spooky themed books all year round. If you're still here, thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. And maybe I'll see you the next time around. Bye! There's certainly no shortage of short stories.